Hello guys and gals, and welcome to another episode of Skills and Abilities. Today we're going to be looking at the ability Oak Sage. Oak Sage is a pet that you can summon, and unfortunately it can be only summoned by itself, so you cannot have Heart of the Wolverine or Spirit of the Barbs with Oak Sage. Oak Sage has relatively low life to start out with, but when you beef him up, he can have a relatively high percentage of life of 528 life. And let's see if I can get him a little bit higher here. We're going to put on some equipment here so we can actually utilize some abilities. And you know what, let's put on a Ward Gothic shield. It's a pretty sexy looking shield. Yeah. Now, Oak Sage is going to increase your HP by a pretty massive percentage. And let's go ahead and put a bunch of points into HP just so we can have our HP at 1,250. And for the purposes of this video, I think I should move myself out of the way of the HP bar. So the HP bar is it's going to get massively multiplied by Oak Sage. At a low level, Oak Sage is only going to give you a bonus of 30%. However, with just a few points, you'll notice that it very quickly starts to go up to 75, 80, and so forth and so on. And when you cast Oak Sage, you will get a very nice bonus in HP. There are also other items in the game which actually give you Oak Sage charges, like for instance Nature's Peace, which can give you level 5 Oak Sage charges that you could utilize on a character that is not a druid. So if I cast Oak Sage on myself here, you will notice that my HP goes up to 2,105 from the 1,250 that I had earlier. This can actually be multiplied with other effects. So for instance, if I were to be a very tanky werebear, I could have a relatively high amount of life. So let's go ahead and put in maximum werebear here. So I've got a very, very tanky werebear. We're also going to beef up Lycanthropy to maximum because Lycanthropy also gives us a maximum life bonus of 185%. And we get a max life of 260% on werebear itself. And you'll notice that when we transform into our werebear form and we go outside and obtain the effect of the massive Oak Sage, you will notice that our life goes up even higher to a pretty massive degree. So we go from 2,105 to 5,069, which is just a massive bump in HP. You can also multiply this even further if you were to use something like Call to Arms, which is going to give you another bump in HP. And it is important to note, I do believe that certain items in the game are not multiplied by this amount of bonus. There are some items, I think like Dwarf Star, for instance, which give a plus 40 to straight to life, which is not affected by the bonus. And I could have sworn I had a Dwarf Star hiding around here somewhere, but I guess not. Oak Sage is an amazing ability which can be applied to your teammates as well, and is going to give them a relatively nice amount of boost to HP. So if you are a character who's utilizing a max level Oak Sage, and let's go ahead and beef our Oak Sage up to max. I didn't even realize our Oak Sage wasn't maxed out there. So let's go ahead and max him out, and now let's go take a look at our HP. So in werebear form, with our maximum Oak Sage, let's resummon him, because of course we have to resummon him to get the effect, is 6,152. And this is also important to note because the level of your Oak Sage is dependent on what you have equipped. So for instance, if I have say, Arachnid's Mesh in my stash, I could put it on to summon my Oak Sage, take the item off, and I would not lose any HP because the Oak Sage's level is determined upon casting him, not upon what gear you have. And this is important because if you're trying to get the absolute most out of your summons, this is one way that you can do it. You can put on a bunch of equipment that has plus to skills first, cast your Oak Sage, and then take that equipment off, and still maintain the extra bonus that you would get from that particular, Oak Sage, which is very, very handy. Now, Oak Sage has a really large radius. It starts out at a relatively large radius already of 20 yards, which is definitely huge if you have ever used the Conviction aura. Conviction has a radius of 13.3 yards. So it's already larger than the Conviction radius. However, when you get it up to, for instance, the level 29, which I'm at right now, you can see it has a massive radius of 57.3 yards, which is just nuts. And as high as you could possibly get it, I'm not sure feasibly how high you could get it, but at level 60, which is I think the highest that it can ever possibly be, it has a 98 and 2/3 yard radius, which is just absolutely nuts. That basically means that just about everything like 3 screens away is going to be hit by this by the aura, which is important because as a bonus to your HP, it is definitely going to be very, very nice to have that bonus. It is also important to note that the HP that the Oak Sage gives you is immediate, and it does not require you to heal up to it. So, for instance, if I go back to town, you'll notice I am missing a tiny bit of HP, which is 4,154 out of 4,214. And when Oak Sage increases my HP, I am still missing that HP, but it is increasing my HP to the new percentage. So I am not missing the HP that it is giving me, but I will still miss any HP that I am missing. So, for instance, if I am really badly hurt, let's see if I can show this off as best as possible. Let me go over here and just get beat down by some of these guys over here. Come, beat me. Oh, it hurts, the pain. Pain, pain. No, my poor Oak Sage. Alright, that's about how much I wanted to get down to. So I'm at about 50% HP, and you'll notice that when I transform into my bear form, for instance, I'm still missing 50% HP. But my HP has gone up to 2,274. And when I summon my Oak Sage, you will notice that I will still be missing 50% HP, which is absolutely fine. But my HP will again increase from 2,074 to 3,320 because I maintain my 50% HP rate. And this is important because Oak Sage is one of those abilities that could potentially be done very poorly. I've had very similar abilities in other games like MMOs. They gave you a bonus to HP, but it would not give you the HP that it was increasing your max to. So like say for instance I was at 1000 HP and it would increase my HP by 500, giving me 1500, but it wouldn't actually heal me for that effect. So if I walked outside of the radius of the Oak Sage and it took that HP away from me, and then I walked back into the radius of the Oak Sage, I would then be missing 500 HP, and then I'd have to heal myself to get that HP back. But that's not the way that Oak Sage works. It actually allows you to obtain that HP exactly as it should be. So it is an exact increase in all of the HP that you currently have, as well as your maximum. So it maintains that 50% no matter what. You might want to think about getting some regeneration with a build like this, though, because you have so much massive HP that regeneration is going to be a pretty huge boon to you in this particular kind of setup. Oak Sage is not only useful to you, it is very useful to your friends, your allies, your paladin, your barbarian, your sorceress, your necromancer. It is absolutely an amazing ability which can increase the survivability of quite a large number of players. And you might be asking yourself, well, why is maximum life so important? Well, the reason why maximum life is so important is because there are so many monsters in the game that can dish out such an amazing amount of damage that you can just be one-shot, believe it or not. Even with maximum resistances, even with high block chance, even with lots of defense, there is still a very good chance that a monster will just kill you in one hit. One clear example of this are the little bone fetishes that are very common Endurance of Hate level 2. They do a massive amount of damage based on their own hit points of 10% of their hit points, and they can deadly strike for a double effect, which basically means that if you don't have enough HP to absorb the damage that they can put out, there's a very good chance that they will one-shot and kill you. So having a high hit point pool can come in very handy to prevent those one-shot attacks. It's basically about absorbing damage. It's about making your character very, very tanky, essentially. And having large amounts of hit points can definitely help you with that. There's one other thing to consider when it comes to having large amounts of hit points, and that is faster hit recovery stuns. So faster hit recovery is a very interesting thing in the game. And basically what it does is if you end up getting hit by a monster, your faster hit recovery can cause what's called a hit recovery stun. A hit recovery stun has a higher percent chance to trigger depending on the amount of HP that you have, because it calculates in how much damage it is in relation to what your hit points are. It's essentially kind of deciding whether or not you have been hit by a massive strike, right? So if I have only 100 health and I get hit for 50 damage, that is 50% of my health. So that is a massive blow to my damage and has a very high chance of causing a hit recovery stun. However, if I had 10,000 health and I got hit for 50 damage would not be anywhere near a high percentage of my health, and so I would have a relatively low chance to trigger a hit recovery stun. There are basically 3 different hit recovery trigger points, if I remember correctly. I'm trying to remember them right off the top of my head. I can never seem to remember them all. If I remember correctly, I believe it's 1/16, 1/8, and 1/4 are the sort of like the hit recovery breakpoints. It's kind of hard to explain, but basically how it works like this. If a ability that comes in hits you and takes off 1/16 of your hit points, 1/16 is a probability of a hit recovery stun. 1/8 is a higher probability of a hit recovery stun, and 1/4 of your hit points is a higher probability of a hit recovery stun. 1/4 being the highest, 1/8 being medium, and 1/16 being the lowest, essentially. So if you think about the amount of HP that you have in regards to hit recovery stuns, you can figure out very quickly that the more HP that you have, the higher the chance is that the hit that comes in is not going to be at least 1/4 or 1/8 of your hit points. And you can very easily calculate that out. So as a max level werebear who is running a Oak Sage, you can see that my HP is 6,152. Which means that if we were to calculate this out, we could do 6,152 HP, and we could do divided by 2, which is going to get us a HP of 3,076 for half damage, and we could divide that by 2 again, which would get our quarter damage of 1,538. So to trigger the percent chance of a quarter damage faster hit recovery probability, a monster would have to hit us for 1,538 damage, which means that we have a relatively low probability of ever triggering a quarter HP faster hit recovery probability. However, we could divide that again to find our 1/8, and 1/8 probability, or sorry, the 1/8 probability of faster hit recovery stuns is 769 damage. Again, very, very rare that we'll probably get hit for 769 damage, and that means we have a relatively low probability of getting a 1/8 probability faster hit recovery stun. Now the 1/16, which is the lowest one, is going to be divided again. So 769 divided by 2 is 384 damage. So the lowest hit, essentially, that could come in that would have a probability of dishing out a faster hit recovery stun is going to be 384 damage, which is still a lot of damage to take in a single hit. And so as you can see, the higher you build your HP, the higher your hit points get, the less probability of a faster hit recovery stun actually happening becomes. Because at 1/16 of your HP, it's about a 37% chance. At 1/8 of your HP, it's about a a 50% chance, and at 1/4 of your HP, it's about a 75% chance of a hit recovery stun. So as the damage increases in proportion to how much HP you have, it is a much higher percent chance that you will end up with a faster hit recovery stun. If a monster hits you for 50% of your HP, there's a very good probability you will end up with a faster hit recovery stun. But if that same exact hit comes in and it is not 50% of your HP anymore, it's only, say, 10% of your HP, because you've increased the maximum of your HP as high as possible, there is a very small chance that it will trigger a faster hit recovery stun, which is what you are looking for. So when you think about Oak Sage, don't just think about the fact that it is increasing your HP. Think about the fact that it is also decreasing the percent chance of faster hit recovery stuns and increasing your survivability by a massive amount. It also increases the survivability of all of your teammates, minions, and mercenaries that happen to be with you. So a very, very good ability all around, and certainly a very nice one in some certain situations. Now, of course, there are some other spirits that maybe you might want to use instead, like Heart of the Wolverine, which is going to give you attack rating and damage, or Spirit of the Barbs, which they are messing around with and could potentially be better in upcoming patches, because they keep tinkering with it, and we'll have to play around with those later. As always, I do appreciate you guys and gals watching my videos, even when I am a hulking werebear using a weird-looking tentacled octopus spirit, which increases my vitality. And as always, keep watching.